I think the way that they have prepared MOU, there is no way, or you can remove Israel from Lebanon, or everything gonna collapse. I think the way that the document was prepared intentionally on the part of Iranians, in my opinion, because not only with the case of Lebanon, you see with the case of sanctions and the nuclear program of Iran, they said there are two lines. One of the sanctions, one of them is related to the sanctions of IAEA, UN Security Council, and primary and secondary sanctions of the United States. And it's all related to the Iranian nuclear program, one by one. And if you go the way that you advance on the on Iranian nuclear program and the sort of inspection they want to have on Iranian nuclear program, you're going to have sanction relief. That's a huge task. I think that would never happen because the Congress is not there. It's not going to happen. This is the first sign. The second sign is Lebanon. As you mentioned, it's crucial. It's so important. There is no way to put the case of Lebanon aside and get along with other points in that plan in the MOU. And I actually, your sort of understanding of the MOU is correct. I think there is no way unless the Trump administration coming out and become something totally different from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, totally different. You know, I tell you what, one of the big indicators is uh, Trump has not fundamentally changed his attitude. You saw what he said,
Yeah.
threatening to take Hormuz, to steal the oil, charge tolls. This is after Marco Rubio gave this
But the
great.
same day, Patrick, sorry for interrupting. The
Yeah,
same day the two delegations were supposed to meet, they said, "I'm gonna, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna, I'm
you
gonna
won't make it
attack
back to your
Iran
effing.
again, and it's gonna be harder than before." Just
Mm,
imagine the guy
that's a
is
huge
not
threat.
there.
Threaten the negotiators, saying you're not going to make it back to your effing country. Okay, that is not the way any politician should speak. In a civilized, advanced country, that they would be removed from office immediately at that point. Not only it's just because they're clearly sabotaging the peace process. They're actively sabotage. Trump actively tried to sabotage the peace process by those statements. That's the fact. And it's just not representing the government or the country in an honorable way. And you can't be a head of state and be dishonorable. You can, but you'll end up in the category of Idi Amin, Adolf Hitler, and a few other beauties in history. That's fine. You can carry on, Trump, and talk like that all you want, but you can't be respected. You can't demand respect on the global stage. You see Trump showing up to the G7 with his shoulders hunched over, moping around. I mean, he looked horrible. He really looked like a mess. And I'm just stating fact, okay? And then he makes he's these attacks, these verbal attacks, these threats. And Nima, his supporters will say, "Oh, that's just Trump. He says things." JD Vance said that. "Oh, I thought the president did great and he was really responding to Iranian threats." That's a lie by the vice president. Lying. Iran didn't threaten the United States, but the US threatened Iran. And those aren't empty threats. The US have already come good on those threats. They've killed the Iranian head of state who didn't do anything to the United States, despite what everybody claims and says. So they justified assassinating the head of state and many other Iranians, scientists, blowing up universities, killing politicians and generals and whatnot. And so the U.S. has already followed through with these threats. So when Trump makes these threats as the president, and then his supporters say he's not accountable to those statements, that's what JD Vance is saying, which is completely ridiculous. And that it's hard to take JD Vance seriously. He's a 41-year-old complete amateur with zero experience in international politics, nothing, and very little experience in politics. Full stop. He was installed into the Trump ticket by Peter Thiel, by the billionaire class. He has no experience. He'd be fine as a senator in Ohio. I'll give him that. But he's not presidential material. He's very shallow. He doesn't have really any real grasp or understanding of anything. He's just kind of a good referee on the sidelines, you know, saying, "Oh, well, we said this and you said that." He's very good at that kind of like extemporaneous rhetoric, but there's no depth there at all. And so I don't have any confidence that he knows what he's doing. He's just got some people, really shady advisors and other lobbyists. So, the advisors, Nima, the advisors to this administration are lobbyists. They're not diplomats, they're not technocrats, they're lobbyists, effectively. Either lobbying for Israel or for the defense industrial big tech AI complex. And if that's the case, don't expect any of this, high level negotiations to be successful. Don't expect it. So where does that leave us, Nima? That leaves us with Iran will institute a force majeure on the region. They're just going to carry on and do what they need to do, and then reality will eventually settle around Iran's steadfast position, and the Gulf Arabs will have to conform to Iran. And ultimately, I think Israel will have no choice but to do that, as well as some of the other actors in the region. And that's just, and the U.S. isn't going to have a whole lot of say in that, you see. But that's going to be a long, painful process, I fear. And so the U.S. isn't going to help expedite this. There is some positive things. The OFAC has released Iranian oil. They've lifted some of the restrictions on licensing and so forth. So the Trump administration has put their money where their mouth is on a couple of those key points. But like you said, with sanctions relief and unfreezing assets, that is an uphill battle in Washington, because you're going against the Israel lobby in Washington on that. Very, very difficult. The media will also chime in and make sure that that doesn't happen. And of course, and Israel is a huge obstacle as well. They're going to do what they're going to do in South Lebanon. So we're at a kind of stalemate there, and the U.S. isn't going to be able to tie break it. I don't think so. I think they can push a little bit, but why J.D. Vance and Trump are pushing is because the poll numbers are showing that Israel's approval rate among American voters is at an all-time low, as is Trump's completely cratering poll numbers. And it's because he has tied himself to Israel. It's one of the reasons why he is really failing in the polls. That's the only reason you're seeing this little pivot from J.D. Vance and Trump. It's not because they care about the Lebanese or the Iranians or the Palestinians. It's because they're taking an absolute bath with the electorate with this war, and everyone knows it was a war for Israel. Everyone knows in America, whether they'll admit it or not. And so that's why they pivoted a little bit. And I'll make a prediction, Nima. J.D. Vance will, and it will be when he starts campaigning, when he starts getting momentum towards the end of the term, he will then distance himself from Trump. And there'll be this disagreement, and he'll try to distance himself from Trump, because Trump will be, he'll go down in history as a running joke for American presidents. The people will make fun of Trump for generations. He'll be the archetype, complete idiot savant of a president that absolutely destroyed everything he touched. Who failed on every conceivable level, including the economy, by the way, which we haven't seen the worst of yet, but we will this summer. And J.D. Vance will probably throw Trump under the bus to some degree. So all this loyalty to his boss that he's doing right now, it's all theater. J.D. Vance hates Trump. He hated him, but he flipped in order to get his position on this ticket, because at the end of the day, all he cares about is getting the path to power and then holding power, because that's what his donors care about. He is an avatar of the big AI, big tech, big industry, and Wall Street. That's what J.D. Vance effectively is, and I will argue that's what Obama was. Obama was an avatar for Wall Street. And so, they created Barack Obama, and that was his power base and ultimately his support, and he delivered for them. Obama absolutely delivered for the elite class, in America. And J.D. Vance's job will be like Obama. He is a type of an Obama character. He's a kind of fabricated politician with no experience. Obama only did 2 years in the Senate, and he was rushed onto the national stage to run for president. J.D. Vance only did 2 years in the Senate, rushed on to the national stage to be, in this case, vice president. But that we see these patterns in American politics. It's what it is, and I don't think we should be under any illusions that this can be any different.
Patrick, there was some sort of a strange things happening during the talks between Iran and the United States in Switzerland. One of them was the huge explosion in Qatar. There was a huge explosion. Looking at the pictures of what has happened, it was somehow amazing. Here is the footage. See the extent of explosion, and then yeah, then we had the Qatari internal, the Qatar's Ministry of Interior confirms that the explosion, it says that it was some sort of technical problems. And Iranian side, by the way, the understanding on the part of Iranian side is basically intelligence. It says that it was an Israeli operation in Qatar to punish the Qatari government
Yes.
because they see Qatar is somehow getting close to Iran, getting closer to Iran. Saudi Arabia, by the way, the same case. That's why Iran didn't attack Saudi Arabia and Qatar in the latest sort of conflict and war between Iran and the United States, between Iran and Israel.
Hmm.
So, what is your understanding of that?
Well, I would believe that assessment because of the timing. First of all, it's very suspicious because if you look at the situation, Nima, it's a deadlock, right? We're in a deadlock. What could break the deadlock? The only two things I think, besides the United States having a sort of, Saul of Tarsus moment, an epiphany, and changing their ways, don't see that happening. But the other thing is a false flag attack. The other thing is an assassination. And you remember the Lebanese Civil War, and you had the assassination of the newly elected president Bashir Gemayel, and that assassination triggered the Sabra and Shatila massacre, which really was one of the things that inspired the formation of
Sabra
Hezbollah.
and Shatila was huge, and the repercussions of that
Massive.
massive.
And so, but that was an assassination that did that. So this is, and many people were assassinated during the Lebanese Civil War. And then afterwards, the assassination of Rafi Hariri, which is still debated. The U.S., of course, want to say that the Syrian government did it, okay? And the Israelis want to say the Syrian government did it, but the Israelis had just as much of a motive as anybody to carry out that assassination, and so probably did the Americans as well, not least of all because it got Syria out of Lebanon, okay? So, but these are sort of what I call game changer events, and in a really fragile sectarian powder keg like Lebanon, it would some kind of a targeted assassination or false flag could create a lot of chaos, and things could very quickly spin out of control. And so we have some stability right now, although the aggression is contained at the moment between Hezbollah and Israel. But things can expand and spin out of control, and then all of a sudden, it becomes very difficult to manage for the Iranians, and then Israel will take advantage of the chaos, especially if they're the ones who did it, who triggered it. And they have throughout history. Israel has a history of false flag attacks, a history, documented history. So that's one of the dangers. So when you see this event in Qatar, it can be viewed in that way, is that an operation was launched, and the Qataris are smart enough not to react to it, because it's also all about how you react to it. But then to say this was a move to discipline Qatar or to punish Qatar, that's also plausible. Because whenever there's high-level negotiations or meetings like the G7, or Munich Security Conference or NATO meetings, you'll see Zelensky immediately, like that day or the day before, launching some massive drone attack or any peace negotiation. So the idea is they don't want any negotiations to develop. They just want to keep the war going, basically. And I think Israel has a motivation that they don't want to see this settlement go anywhere. They want to keep their wars going. They're openly, the Israeli establishment is openly shilling for the U.S. to continue to fight Iran. They're lobbying in America, basically attacking Trump. And the Iranian royalists and the Zionists are saying Donald Trump, even the Democrats on the IPAC payroll, saying that what's he doing? He's giving Iran all these concessions, and he should be bombing them. And they can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That fake talking point that they keep hanging everything on. So it's pretty clear who wants the war and who doesn't want the war. And so that to me, I'm very worried about, Nima. Is the false flag risk and the targeted assassination risk. So and Israel would be behind both of those because it's very easy to see motive because they're very open about their intentions now. There's no hiding it. So, and of course, the global media and the war hawks in America would be on board completely with a false flag narrative to sort of implicate Hezbollah or implicate the Iranians or maybe a related third party group that they could then sort of indirectly blame Iran, but move things forward very quickly, in terms of some kind of a military operation or something to break the ceasefire and sort of completely derail these negotiations. That to me is a huge risk. If that doesn't happen, then we're looking at a long, drawn out, painful process. And one thing that is encouraging, Nima, is, and I don't want, I'm gonna be careful with Nima. I don't want to give any credit to Mohammed Al Jalani, aka President Al Sharar. But when Trump said, "Well, maybe we should send Syria in there to deal with Hezbollah. They do a better job than the Israelis." And the headline is in America, "Well, this is an insult to the Israelis or whatever." But at least Jalani, the Al Qaeda government, said they have no interest in going in and fighting Hezbollah. So we'll give him a little bit of credit. We'll give him a participation medal for that. So if that's indeed the case, so that's about the most positive thing I heard all week, Nima, to be honest.
Exactly. I agree with you. And we had Naftali Bennett, Patrick, talking with, basically, he was talking on CNN, on the various mainstream media in the United States. He basically says that for the first time since the establishment of Israel, the brand Israel is a net negative in the United States. I would say they're trying to do everything. He said that he's trying to do everything. That Ben Gvir comes out, says something, he has to go on mainstream media to say, no, we're not that crazy. We're not gonna go that far. And but the situation is serious. You're looking at section 224 and section 662, the two sections. They want to merge the U.S. military with the Israeli one, U.S. intelligence with the Israeli one. Two important sectors when it comes to the United States and the power it possesses as a superpower. And you merge your military and intelligence, it seems that Israel has access to everything. While you see the tone, the atmosphere has been changing and is changing drastically toward Israel. So you have to officialize what has happened, in terms of the military power and intelligence, the way that you can facilitate the Israeli agenda in the Middle East. I don't know how far that could be effective, Patrick, because the region has grown tremendously, in my opinion. That's why you see when you have the war in Ukraine, who's going to host the negotiations? It's going to be Turkey in that
Mm.
region. With Iran and the United States, you see Pakistan mediating between Iran and the United States, and Qatar the same way. That's why if that explosion was related to the way Qatar was behaving and participating, facilitating the negotiations, and with Iranian frozen assets, the same. Qatar is playing a very important role with the frozen assets. You see, the region is somehow reshaping itself. That it is not only in the United States, but in the region. You remember Abraham Accords and normalizing the relationship with Israel. Those days are gone. I think Israelis are perceiving, are getting to that point. I don't know what the United States can do for them. There is nothing there anymore for the United States to put pressure on Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Iran. That this is the outcome of what Israel has done so far. What do you make of it? And the way Israel desperately is trying to move to change the game, change the equation in the Middle East in favor of their state.
Yeah, you're right. The Abraham Accords are completely dead, and I don't. There's no chance. Lindsey Graham and others will say, no, Saudi Arabia is going to join the Abraham Accords next week or whatever. And I think just delusional. These people are so desperate. It was a hollow idea from the beginning, but they only managed to half sell it because there was a chance of stability. But once the U.S. and Israel launched this war, then that was all bets are off. Abraham Accords is basically laying at the bottom of the Persian Gulf somewhere. It's over because the U.S. showed the Gulf Arab states that the U.S. is a liability to their existence. Basically, that the U.S. is not going to be conducive to their future in any meaningful sense. Everyone, listen. If there's one thing Gulf Arabs know, it's oil and finance, and they know full well the petrodollar on life support. They know, and they're going to be positioning their assets and hedging accordingly, and minimizing the risk and exposure to U.S. debt and so forth. So that's already that process has already begun and was accelerated by Trump. There's another one of Trump's big failures, if you want to look at it that way, is that he accelerated the demise of the petrodollar by abusing the U.S. Treasury and launching this war. So that they already understand that, and that they also know that U.S. involvement in their countries comes with strings attached, and those strings are political, and those strings have to do with Israel. And Israel now is just basically a completely damaged brand. There's no chance that association with Israel is going to have a stigma attached to it. These are murderers, killers, rapists. What they have been found guilty of is just the worst crimes against humanity and against Arabs. So that would be seen as a big betrayal, I think, going forward, for Gulf Arab countries to be doing business and to open cordial relations with a country like Israel, based on what they're doing. So the more this goes on, the worse that situation, that equation is just going to get worse and worse. So the U.S. really don't have a natural position to fit. They don't have a parking space anymore in the Middle East and West Asia. They just don't. It's gone. I mean, they had a whole host of military facilities which have been completely trashed by the Iranians at this point. But those facilities were based on this idea that the number one threat in the region is Iran, and Iran retaliating against Gulf Arab states is very clear, and the world knows, and the Gulf Arabs know. That wasn't because Iran doesn't like Gulf Arabs. It was because the Gulf Arabs were allowing the United States to launch attacks on Iran from their territory. Simple, in the laws of war. So this point is not lost on the Gulf Arabs. They're not that dumb and naive. They understand that now. They probably pushed back a little bit on it at the time because it was very awkward and uncomfortable, and it worried a lot of people. They were losing a lot of money. It's tremendously damaging to their economy, to their politics, the confidence of their populations that they're going to these governments, these sheikdoms are going to be able to maintain order and provide a conducive environment for direct foreign investment, high quality and standard of living. All these things came under threat during this last 100 days. You have to remember that. So, and really, if you look at the source of the problem, for them, ultimately, if they trace it back, it's not Iran, it's the United States and Israel. They opened they opened Pandora's box, not Iran. Iran responded to the aggression. So that's now a known equation. It's a known equation. So I think going forward, the U.S. is going to try to figure out how it can stay in the region credibly. This is a difficult question. This is going to be a difficult question. Can they maintain a military presence in the region? And if so, what for? What for? The United States is the biggest threat. The U.S. military, the Trump administration, they're the biggest threat to U.S. interests in the region, actually, them being there. If American companies want to do business in the Middle East, they're more than welcome to. But if they're doing it alongside the U.S. military, I think they're going to have a problem, quite frankly. This is just common sense. I don't think this has really landed with a lot of the people in Washington yet. Not all of them. Some of them are still think they're in 1990 still. So it hasn't quite landed yet, but I think it will eventually. So in terms of the future of the region, I think that's just that can only be positive. So that the Gulf Arabs are going to have to decide, do they want to have a future or not? Because if they don't get on board with, recognizing that Iran is a regional superpower now, and then dealing with them accordingly in that way, respectfully, and then the region starts to have serious discussions about a regional security architecture, but that has no American involvement in it at all. That's
Yeah.
by the region and for the region, and that has Israel on the periphery, something to contain Israel, because that's the aggressor. The problem, if the U.S. leave, then there's one problem left in the region, and that's Israel. They're the most aggressive. They're killing people left, right, and center. They're attacking 6, 7 different countries in the region. They're bombing everybody, assassinating everybody. They're clearly Israel is the problem in the region. It's not Hezbollah. It's not Iran's proxies. Those talking points worked before, but they're not going to work anymore. And you even see, the whole nation building project in Yemen is kind of falling apart a little bit vis-a-vis the UAE, Saudi Arabia's involvement in that as well. They're not able to follow through with that project. So then you're probably going to see the British and the Americans move into Yemen, maybe in a more serious way, to try to get a piece of that and try to control and steer that situation. The partition. They're trying to split the country in two, basically. What the Americans and the British and the Saudis were trying to do with Yemen is essentially what they did in Sudan. It's the same thing, and it's a completely artificial, covert operation designed to split the country, and then get operational control over the key waterway. But there's also resource bounty in South Yemen. That's probably massive in terms of untapped oil, for instance.
What Israel is trying to do in Somalia.
Yes, exactly. Same. Somaliland, trying to create a breakaway state because of its position. You see, it's strategic. So Israel wants to commandeer Somaliland, and of course, they're the only ones who recognize Somaliland, obviously. So
I think together with UAE, if I'm not mistaken, UAE.
Okay, no surprise there. No surprise there. So it's probably crawling with Mossad. It's a complete operation. They sell this to the people there. You're going to be free. You're going to have your own country. But this is the problem: is when you start breaking up countries, the constituent parts are just weaker than the original country. You don't have any bargaining power on the world stage if you're a tiny state. That's the problem. Just after World War I, Nima.